And I had this example in Turkey, a friend of mine. He's a businessman, very successful, and he was in a partnership, a business partnership with an unbeliever. And it constantly caused problems. Because the unbeliever friend was very happy to give bribes, was very happy to lie about the products, about the money they received, different things. And this obviously bothered the believing friend. Because, and this was a very nice chap. I liked the other guy as well. I know them both. And yet it was constantly a source of tension in their relationship. Because they were in different lines. You see, they were in very different lines. One was bound to the Word of God, to follow Christ. The other one didn't care. Okay? And that's what yoke is all about. Yoke is when you have two animals that are plowing a field. You bind them together at the neck. Now, if you have two cows together or two oxes together, you bind them and they pull that plow straight down the field. It's great. But if you put a cow and a donkey together, what happens? That's what you call an unequal yoke. And they break the yoke. They ruin the yoke inevitably. More than often because they're not at the same strength, they're not at the same capacity, not at the same height. And they're going in different directions, different pace. Everything is different. And that's why God is giving this command, not for His sake, for our sake, to warn us. I've seen this over and over again. People say, well, I'll get married and maybe I'll lead her to Christ. There are no guarantees of that. On the contrary, there is God's warning. Don't do it. Don't tempt God. This is important because Jesus, when he was tempted by the devil, remember what the devil said to him? Throw yourself off from here. God will catch you. The angels will catch you. True. God could catch him. The angels could catch him. What Satan was saying was true. And yet Jesus' answer is very important. Do not tempt the Lord your God. In other words, I cannot presume on God's grace. I cannot assume that He will show mercy. Especially if I am defiantly disobeying His word. Now, I've known believers who have gotten married without knowing this, when they were young believers, and no one taught them this. And God had mercy on them, and their wives were saved. I've seen many others stray from the faith. My own grandfather, who was a missionary, had 6 children, and then my grandmother died. My grandfather was alone, the children were gone, and there was another young lady starting to come to church. She was very attractive. She was interested in the gospel and interested in my grandfather. And very quickly they decided to get married. He figured she was on her way. She was going to get saved soon. But soon after they got married, she stopped coming to church. And it became evident that she was coming to church for him. And they had a decent marriage, but the reality is my grandfather told me in tears, that was the greatest mistake of my life. He was a missionary, remember. He was a wise man. I respect him greatly. But he said that very simple presumption, she's almost saved. Let's just go ahead. He said it's made my life miserable. She's a wonderful woman. But he wants to invite Christian people to his home to have a Bible study. She'll say no. As simple as that. He wants to go to a camp to serve. She says no. She's his wife. He has to listen to her. Can't just ignore her. So again, remember that if God's giving us a command, it's for our best. Let's not presume on His mercy. Just try to work within what He is teaching. Now, if you want a clear verse on a believer should marry a believer, the end of chapter 7 of 1 Corinthians, when it talks about a believer, a widowed person, being married, he says, as long as she belongs to the Lord. That's a very important phrase, that it emphasizes that whoever we are going to marry, whether we are newly getting married or whether we are widowed,